Intuitive Public Music, with a number of our groups, released a message yesterday, and circumstances have shifted as they do since that message. So I'm going to catch us up wherever we're at. Special support opportunity. 29th March 2022, 9 Serpent. Lend a hand to facilitate our intuitive media survivors groups in producing intuitive public music. Our necessary infrastructure is nearly complete. We are searching for assistance to get 2 to 3 more software disability recovery aid solutions in place, which looks to cost a little over $100. Can you assist? Intuitive Public Radio and our Intuitive Community Network are organizing individual and collective income streams and economic access points for severely disabled survivors of human trafficking and invisible violence, who are otherwise prevented from financial participation and basic survival resourcing. Even better, these projects and income streams provide opportunities for healing, expression, repair of one's creative process, and vocational resilience that is unparalleled by any other trauma recovery resource. Building this media infrastructure, we get to experience how survivors recover from what had seemed irreparable and bring their own essential gifts into healing and strengthening themselves, their environments, their families, and their community members. Be our co-producer and claim your front row seat to the powerful and unique musical expressions of our friends and colleagues who have survived the impossible. All of us together are now building the new world our hearts hadn't dared hope for. In our midst, it's manifesting. Contribute via paypal.me/intuitiveinvisibles and reach out to t.me/Max Morris for additional arrangements. Find more information about how to support our work by visiting intuitive.community/support. This message to be found at t.me/intuitivepublicmusic2399. There are a lot of functions that we repair by facilitating flow, by facilitating freedom. We are facilitating function where it may have been destroyed. We are facilitating the repair of people's decision-making processes. We're facilitating the recovery of diverse healing modalities that a living being recognizes for oneself may be at that time most effective. And that kind of decision making is first destroyed by something like endocrine disruptors. And then that damage is compounded and perpetuated by circumstances that refuse to acknowledge the real situation, the real damage being done, the disability that is a result of being continuously targeted, whether you're targeted directly interpersonally or ambiently demographically. People are experiencing targeting that takes down all of their facility for doing the things that people in their communities expect them to be able to do pretty easily. And when people cannot function in the ways that others expect them to, many people disabled in this way go through years or decades or their whole life in a circumstance where they could take very powerful action on behalf of themselves and others. They could be implementing very powerful solutions in their communities. They could be powerfully protecting their spaces, their environments. They could be collaborating in powerful ways with people they care about, people they respect, people they want to work with, people who need people to collaborate with. There are a lot of those. We all want to help one another, but if our ability to help one another is taken away, then we must restore that first if we expect to be able to perform other functions in honorable, respectful collaboration. And this is something that a lot of people miss if they haven't had the experience of going through that kind of compounded damage. But also, many people don't know enough about how neurology works and how trauma and trauma recovery work to be able to recognize what pieces need to go in place in what order. And although we have had to change the order that we address things in rather considerably as a moment-to-moment practice, we do like to return to the order of things that would be most effective, and sometimes we need to find it. But this one we've really we've been very present with for a long time, and the words are better now. When we need to be able to do a particular thing, when we want to see increasing functions and recovery in the most terrible circumstances that people feel, like so many people feel like you just have to walk away from this stuff, like there's nothing you can do about it. There is actually something you can do about it. Piece by piece, we can restore the sovereignty of living beings who have been intentionally, violently stripped of their sovereignty, sovereign function. Part of how we do that is in the way that we organize cash flow. Because cash flow is one of the first things that is taken away from survivors at the most violent intersections. And often it's something that is couched in terms of, you didn't do this thing well enough, so you don't deserve the privilege of managing money, when in fact that person has been targeted with violence that destroyed part of their neurology in a way, for instance, like left hemisphere damage that, for instance, for me, that would keep me from thinking and expressing myself in the same ways as others about money, about numbers, about a lot of left-brained things. For survivors to regain a lot of different kinds of basic brain function, our ability to make flowing decisions based on our moment-to-moment situations, it is the first most important thing. If we do not do that, then people end up having to navigate circumstances of compounding neurological injury that are unaddressed by relational resourcing in their environments. And so the way that people need to conduct themselves to survive and be successful in the absence of others understanding what they're experiencing, it requires them to be able to make more of those decisions more quickly without always checking in or asking permission from others. And the way that we do that is to facilitate flow and function recovery in this compartment and facilitate specific functions, specific outcomes in this compartment. But these are two different things. And people who want to support our groups and want to have a very clear cost and result often do not have enough of an understanding about the neurological circumstances that we're working with to be able to recognize how we get to the place where we can say this amount of money accomplishes this thing. Because what is needed before that happens is to put the survivors who are working on a project in a position where they have the freedom to make their own decisions as part of their cognitive creative process, as part of their physical recovery process, because that's how they regain the clarity of neurological function to be able to really interact and collaborate more directly with people who have not been neurologically injured in these ways. We have described this a lot of different ways over the years, and this is a new one. I'm squinting at it a lot. It feels a little hard for my brain, but what it's connected to right now is our efforts all across the network to restore musical access. And we talk about commensal musicality all the time, but one of the things that commensal musicality means is that survivors are trying to regain their privileges of sound healing, of making their own sounds. But survivors who, like me, were musical professionals before certain things happened in our lives. Others have not been able to show up the way I am showing up because we have to put the correct resources in place to do that. But there are a lot of us. There are more and more people all of the time who are being affected this way. People who are connected with our network now and people we know we will continue to be connected with into the future. It's important for communities to have this resourcing everywhere there is trauma occurring, because musical resourcing, along with safe food sovereignty resourcing, are two major parts of what has to happen in order for us not to simply be abandoning people to their horrible deaths. So commensal musicality is about we make decisions to bring us closer to music making and sound healing and recovering professional vocations in music and art and expression and performance. And we make those decisions sometimes at the expense of our access to safe food, because the brain can do something that it can do in the moments that it can do it. And if those are the moments where you could produce something that made the difference you needed to make, sometimes your body knows that that's the thing to try, and that maybe then you will be able to buy the safe food you need. So we have a lot of circumstances over the years, for myself, for others in groups I've been collaborating with directly, in other groups all across the network where people are encountering very similar circumstances. We want it to be a lot more clear in our public community collaborations that when we do what we're doing, when we achieve what we're achieving, we are frequently doing it in terrible risk of our lives, because what it takes to choose what is most right to choose often requires us to trade off something that other people can't see, because they can't see the real circumstances we're navigating, because there's so much misinformation about the health intersections that we're navigating, about the trauma intersections we're navigating, and what this kind of neurological injury means. So one of the things that we are talking through quite a bit is with this continuously shifting landscape where, for instance, we had 2 to 3 software solutions we were looking at yesterday, and now that has changed to one software solution, which looks like it's covered by Bridge Family Group. But Bridge Family Group, the way things get covered, that money comes out of the ability to reach food, the ability to reach emergency supplies, the ability to reach medicine purchases. And so there are hard decisions that survivors are having to make all the time. And if there isn't going to be enough money for the real survival needs, what do you want to fund in the hopes that all survival needs will be more facilitated, will be more supported by the one of 5 or 6 or 50 things that actually has to be financially addressed and can't be, because people are being abandoned to die. They're already in process of that. We are already encountering those frontline circumstances. And so part of what we have to address when we talk about this is, how is flow being facilitated? How is function recovery being facilitated? And that's not only by saying this person recovers these functions by us paying for this thing that costs this amount of money, and then their functions will be recovered and ta-da, yay. Recovery occasionally works that way, but a lot of times recovery doesn't work that way. Recovery is itself a flow kind of thing. And if you want concrete outcomes for a living body, we first must always be in full respectful relationship with that living body. And that's part of the reason that our financial atmosphere on this planet has ended up being so challenging. The way that we're doing this now is to say, what funding is needed to facilitate flow and function recovery for the freedom of the living beings that we wish to facilitate in doing what they're doing what we're planning. And then once we have facilitated sufficient flow and function recovery on the basis of what the living beings are really experiencing, whether or not they can communicate that extensively yet, they can recover decision-making functions, they can recover creative process functions. I certainly have recovered amazing creative process functions. All kinds of things have happened because of what Bridge Family Group has been facilitating. But of course, when Bridge Family Group facilitates, this is groups of survivors across the network, families and isolated individuals who are doing whatever they can to fund what seems most likely to strengthen what we need strengthened. But when Bridge Family Group pays for something, the network is still experiencing the compounding damage of funding efforts where we have to make terrible sacrifices in order to fund those efforts. So we don't report success when Bridge Family Group funds something. When Bridge Family Group funds something, it is a matter of people in very serious, very scary, very life-threatening survival circumstances saying together, okay, well, like all of us can kind of scrape together this money. Is this what we want to do with it? Because it's really going to matter. And if we make the wrong decision, people die. If we make the wrong decision, then it can be an extra weeks, months, years of terrible suffering. So the stakes are very, very high. And the reason the stakes are so high is when we do not first fully facilitate flow and the living being's sovereign function recovery that is not dependent on this person gave you this much money, this group gave you this much money, so you had better recover those functions in exactly this particular way. No, we can't do that. Most people would not be able to recover on that basis. When you need to recover from trauma, you are recovering individual sovereignty. You are recovering your full facility of source self. And you don't necessarily know what that is, except in the moment you're experiencing it. So to plan on it based on a particular portion of funding is not appropriate, even though a lot of people don't necessarily realize that, and it can take a long time to figure out, unfortunately, because of the way that financial and economic access have been organized in the world that we're in. So I will continue to check in as regards how we want to build the music infrastructure. But when people are asking me about this, I think the main thing that we need to talk about is, because we have a variety of specific decisions that we might end up making with Intuitive Public Music to move that infrastructure forward. But the more important conversation is not those specific things, because those specific things will change. Those specific things are going to shift and flow as we find whatever balance, whatever movement helps us move through what we're moving through. So for instance, it was 2 or 3 software solutions, and then it was one $99 solution. And now I'm not actually sure what it is. I need to take another look at it. But we have plans stretching into the future that are not, they're not concrete, immutable events or objects. They're part of the collective relationship of all of us working on this. We don't want people to come and fund just one particular thing so that they can feel good about having funded that concrete thing, because that's actually a much less effective way to interact with us and collaborate with us. What is much more effective is for us to be in relationship moving into the future and make plans together and get excited about what we can do together, and always be acknowledging and mindful of where we are first facilitating flow and function recovery by making resources available so that survivors are making their own decisions on a moment-to-moment basis and are not slowed down by having to explain each of those tiny incremental decisions to others who don't have the same experiences and don't understand the same frameworks. There are an amazing number of groups that are working on this. It's really exciting. When we talk about our public channels, we're talking about a lot of different groups are usually associated with any single public channel. And then we have a public chat space, and then we have various private chat spaces and other project relationships that happen around that. So any one of these that I mention is a series of groups. Some people are in many groups at once. I'm part of all of these. It's really amazing to have an opportunity to put my brain in the space where I can come back into contact with more of these details, because a lot of the time I have to compartmentalize so that I can find the verbal neurology that I need to explain a particular thing. But then it takes me a while to regain access to these other parts of my brain because of the challenges here in my location and my own recovery circumstances in need of resourcing. But when we work on this together, it's such a tremendous source of nourishment for me, and it repairs my brain as we do it. And it's so neat. It's so good. It's so good to do that. And at least I get to share with you here how that happens for me, because in most of our groups we do not yet have a means of facilitating more individuals, more survivors in our groups to show up the way I'm showing up now. So the way I'm showing up now is so that we can create what is needed so that our friends and colleagues can show up too. And some of them don't want to, but a lot of them do want to, and want to feel the strength and support of communities that care about them. Facilitating flow and function recovery through funding through collective collaboration for economic access to ensure that anybody in our communities that has been cut off from economic access, that has been cut off from making an income, we all want to always consider together, how do we make our spaces safer? How do we make the people in our spaces safer? And when we do that, we are restoring that moment-to-moment decision-making privilege. We are restoring the flow of someone's cognitive and creative capacities, problem-solving capacities, income-generating capacities. And we're talking about survivor professionals who have lived expertise that bring immediate, effective solutions to problems that others consider so impossible and so hopeless that they have to make a decision to leave a bunch of people to die on the basis of that when it's not necessary. So these are professionals who already have a huge amount of personal facility in doing things that need done in our communities. So how do we facilitate their recovery in whatever ways to allow them to bring their strengths into their communities, into their families, into the network where we are producing such benefits for one another locally and non-locally? Facilitating that flow means filling our vessels with blessings. PayPal.me/intuitiveinvisibles is ours at the moment. We don't feel good about PayPal. PayPal is not a great place for us to put our energy and trust, but it's our access point right now. So we're looking for more people to work on this together and develop plans and support these plans into the future and collaborate directly with our groups, whether that's individually or as part of a group environment. It's different in every case. When we do this, we bring together the pieces, PEACES, that have been so necessary. And when so many people are having such a hard time and saying, well, why didn't this work? Why didn't this happen? Why couldn't these people understand one another? Why did this conflict occur? Why couldn't we get these resources in place sooner? Why this other thing? Why all of these personal failures? Why all of this social strife? How is this? The reason it's been occurring is because one of the first things that was taken away from our communities was our real bonds of relationship in community, our real creative capacities together in community. We restore that first. A lot of other things turn out to just work. Intuitive public music, intuitive emergent, intuitive recovery, intuitive song, intuitive opera company, the Mold Cabaret, spontaneous cosmology, commensal musicality, Pittsburgh IPR, Jewish ancestor, intuitive sacred, intuitive performance, intuitive media, Northeast IPR. That's not all of them. I didn't even mention the Dream Museum. The Intuitive Invisible should also be on this list. I recorded a video. It's almost 30 minutes and 2.5 gigs. So I'm gonna go and export it to be a lot smaller because that's a lot of space and we need new hard drives. Speaking of flow facilitation, I'm gonna move on to the next part of my morning. Gratitude. Blessings.